Welcome to my studio. My name is Jeff Purtle, and in 30 minutes I will summarize what's unique and significant about Claude Gordon and his teaching for trumpet and brass players. This is a bit of a daunting task since I studied with Claude for 10 years and personally have taught over 70,000 lessons since 1984. Looking in my studio here, I can say that no amount of equipment or degrees on the wall or famous people that you study from matters as much as knowing how to practice. My most valuable asset in my studio is my library of method books and solos, because the knowledge and experience that is in those books has become mine. And the person that showed me how to digest that information and make it a part of myself was Claude Gordon. Claude Gordon stayed 10 years with cornet legend Hurrell Clark. If you look in Claude's first published book, Systematic Approach, you will see 7 items of brass playing listed, and they are essentially the same as the 7 items listed in Hurrell Clark's Setting Up Drills book. Therefore, if you have a problem with what Claude Gordon taught, then you have a problem with what Hurrell Clark taught. This is where Claude's teaching became slightly controversial, because he said that there's only one way to play the brass instruments, and that all other ways are incorrect. What he was referring to was regards to the mechanics of playing. As we list off these 7 items, it should become apparent that they're not that controversial. Each of the 7 items work together in harmony, and any one item can't be taken away and made to be the only thing that matters. Wind power is always the first item to address, because most problems relate to this. However, it's important to note that wind power is not the same as wind capacity, and people that get sidetracked with trying to measure how much capacity their lungs hold or various things like that are missing the point. The point of wind power is the energy behind the blowing. And in order to maximize this, it involves correct posture, which basically means you take a big breath and your chest and lungs expand. And as you exhale, you don't let your chest collapse downward. When your chest collapses downward, you lose your power. And if you lose your power, then you'll try to make up by doing lots of other things that create problems. So if this one thing is working correctly, it causes other things to work easier. This also takes the focus off whether your stomach moves or not. Some people, it'll become more apparent that their stomach may or may not move, but that's not the focus. If your chest is maintained up and you're taking a big breath, everything else will function the way it's intended to function. So we're talking about efficient use of wind, and specifically the power behind the blowing. For those things to work well, it's as simple as taking a big breath and keeping your chest up. The tongue is the second item of the 7. The first thing to talk about, though, is what we would call tongue level. Tongue level means that as you go lower, your tongue goes flatter in an ah syllable, which thereby increases the size of the inside of your mouth and causes the air to go slower. As you ascend and go higher, your tongue goes up and forward in your mouth, which changes the shape and the size of your mouth so that the air comes out your mouth faster. Tongue level, though, is where Claude Gordon was even more unique, saying that for every single note on your brass instrument, you can feel where the notes are, not with your lips as much as you can with your tongue. And that when you are acutely in tune with where your tongue level is for each note, if your tongue is in the right place for that note, you basically can't miss it. There are some people that will say that the tongue doesn't move at all. There are some schools of thought that say you should just think ah the whole time. Most of the people that do that, and that really do that, they struggle with being able to play in the high register on the trumpet. I would like to play an MRI video recently done by Sarah Willis, who's a French horn player. As she ascends to higher notes, you can see her tongue moving up and forward as the inside of her mouth is changing and the speed of the air is being controlled by the tongue. I would argue that every single person that plays a brass instrument does this to some extent or another. Some people might do it more efficiently than others, but everyone does it. Within the second item, there's also a unique way of doing single tonguing. Claude Gordon referred to it as K-tongue modified. Some people might call it anchor tonguing or dorsal tonguing. K-tongue modified, I believe, is a better name for it. Anchor tonguing was something that Claude Gordon never liked that description of it, because the tongue is not actually anchored or firm or locked in place. It is actually kind of flexible and able to move around. When you slur, notice where the very tip of your tongue is. Now, when you do the same thing K-tongued, gung ki 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 ki, notice where the very tip of your tongue is. Then do the same thing with single tongue and notice how it's different. K-tongue modified, though, is such that the very tip of your tongue stays in the same place as it would when you're K-tonguing. So that the very tip of your tongue is sitting around the top edge of your bottom teeth, and you're producing the tack just slightly back from the tip. Not in the middle of the tongue, but slightly back, going T, 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 T. It allows you to maintain the arch in the front part of your tongue and allows you to feel every note in a way that you couldn't do any other way of single tonguing. This came from Herbert L. Clarke too, but most people miss it. If you look in Herbert L. Clarke's characteristic studies, he describes K-tongue modified single tonguing, but he only does it in 1 or 2 sentences. But then following it, he's got some exercises that work specifically on just K-tonguing. Very few people work on just K-tonguing. When we do exercises, the exercises should transform our habits and our playing. You can understand that the value of playing an exercise day after day for a few weeks, maybe a month, until it causes things to evolve and change in your playing. New habits are developed and they start to feel different, and your playing becomes easier. Wind control is the third item, and a perfect example of how several of the items work in harmony. Wind power and the tongue work together with wind control. When we go to higher notes on the trumpet or any brass instrument, your tongue has to move into the E position more. But without the increase of wind power, the note will shut off. To illustrate this point, Claude frequently made comparisons to flying an airplane. This is a perfect example of how wind power, the tongue, and wind control all work in harmony. Any of you that have flown in an airplane can relate to feeling how the pilot gives the engines more power as the plane is angling up. So what is happening is the pilot is pulling back on the stick, which is raising the elevator in the back, which is the flat tail in the back of the plane. It's angling the plane up. And if that's all he did, air would hit the bottom of the plane. It would create more drag or more resistance. The plane would slow down and it would go into a stall. So the pilot has to coordinate the right amount of power to increase with the engine so that it can climb to a higher altitude. In a similar sort of way, that's what we do when we play certain exercises that people might call lip flexibility studies. Claude Gordon would call those exercises tongue level studies, because you're feeling how your tongue moves you from note to note. But in conjunction with moving your tongue, you also have to crescendo for the upper notes and decrescendo for the lower notes. And what this does is it changes habits and allows you to feel how to use the air and play more with the air and less with your lips playing the instrument. And it's one of the things that unlocks how to play the trumpet easier in all aspects.
Okay. Now, any one of you or all of you individually can learn to do that easily with proper practice.
The next item is the fingers of the right hand for trumpet players, or the fingers of the left hand for French horn players. Or if it's a trombone player, it would be your wrist and your grip and hand position on your right hand. With fingers, though, this is one of the items that was better explained in person with Claude. And I will just show briefly what I'm talking about. He wanted people to not just press the valves down, but strike them down hard and lift them high. And also that your thumb of your right hand would not be between the valves like this, between the first and second valve, but on the front side of the valve with the knuckles straight, not bent. And that would make your fingers go into a position where you're not on the tips and you're not flat, but you're on this part of the finger right here that you would call the ball of the fingers. And so when you're doing this, you're striking and lifting. So when we would do different exercises like Clarke's technical studies, the primary thing the first time through the book was to nail down the fingers working like that. Not for speed, not for anything else other than the fingers working the right way. This is one of the things related to wind control also. So if your fingers are working right, where they're clean, going up and down and striking and lifting like we should, it allows you to be able to play longer in one breath and to play cleaner, and a lot of other things can work easier. The fifth item might seem insignificant, but it is the grip of the left hand. This matters more than most people think. Your left hand, you want it to be where it's firm grip, and at the same time, you want your wrist to be able to move around freely. Because when we're moving from low to high notes on the trumpet and you're thinking ah and e, your jaw will also move around at the same time. And as your jaw moves, your face moves. And if your wrist and everything is locked in one position, it can't be free to move as it needs to move. The sixth item is the muscles of the face. Now, the muscles of the face basically have to support your lips so that they keep vibrating. And over time, they get strong to where they can last a really long time. I like to compare the muscles of the face and the strength involved with that to the strength of a ballerina versus the strength of a weightlifter. The way you develop these muscles is by practicing lip flexibility studies that I think would be better called tongue level studies. By doing those, it teaches your face and the muscles of your tongue and your air and everything else how to move around, and it learns how to work more efficiently and easily, and you can play longer. The seventh item is the lips. The lips' function is to just purely vibrate and produce sound in response to what is happening with the wind power and the tongue level that's making them vibrate. In a similar sort of way, if our lips respond easily and we're not doing something that inhibits them from that, then the lips won't be an issue. And then the tongue and the air can make everything work the right way. St. Jacome said the mouthpiece should be placed 2/3 on the top lip and 1/3 on the lower, according to all authorities except one person I shall not name. He, of course, was talking about Arbon. Most people look at the Arbon book and say Arbon said to play 1/3 on the top lip, but you have to note that Arbon was not dogmatic about it. And then also in the Arbon book, Arbon talks about people that have changed their embouchure and had problems. You have to ask yourself, what were they changing from and what were they changing to? If they were trying to be like Arbon, they would have been changing from being higher on their top lip to being lower. It bears mentioning that Claude Gordon did not have anyone buzz on their mouthpiece. About the only time he would ever do that is if someone was going through an embouchure change and they wanted to get used to producing a sound in a new location on the lip. He would say, put the mouthpiece in the new place and take it off, do that. And it wasn't to play any exercises, wasn't to play anything more than just getting a sound. Once that happened for a few days, never buzzed the mouthpiece again. We never played exercises on the mouthpiece. We never played anything on the lead pipe. We never played anything with the lips by themselves. His response was always that you play the trumpet and not the mouthpiece. The mouthpiece attached to a buzzing device still can't feel the same as it does attached to the trumpet. The reason why is the trumpet is a tube and it wants to resonate at certain frequencies. And when we're playing our lip flexibility studies and playing all the open notes or second valve notes, we are feeling how the tongue level and the wind power in the air and everything responds for each of those notes, and we can feel how the notes slot in, and we're learning how to control our particular trumpet. That's the reason why practicing flexibility studies matters so much, so that you can feel how to efficiently find those notes and slur over the instrument. Focus on feel is an important thing. There are some that say, don't think about the feel. Like those that might be from other schools of thought would say, just focus on the music, just focus on the sound. What's different about Claude Gordon is that when we focus on the sound, we might miss the feel, and then the sound might not be there very much longer. But if we focus on the feel, we can play easier, and then the sound will also be a byproduct of that. So good sound is the byproduct of correct, easy playing.
Hi, my name's Dave Bertie. I've been working with Jeff Purtle now for 4 years. He's unlike any trumpet teacher I've had before. I've had some really good players who taught me. But Jeff is probably the first guy I've met who I would say is a very, very good teacher. I recently completed the Walter Smith top tones with him, and the material that he brought into my practice routines months before the difficulties I was going to face in the top tones reared their ugly head surprised me a lot. And that is really what the Claude Gordon approach is about, preparing a student for the difficulties they're about to face. On a personal note, I think that it is so much nicer to come to the practice room looking forward to practice, because you're going to develop your skills. You're not simply going to restrict yourself to what the pad requires. So that kind of thinking means that you come to the practice room for yourself, not for other people. That is very cool.
A typical practice routine would have breathing exercises. The purpose of that is to develop wind power. The next item is tongue level exercises, or what some people call lip flexibility. I wish everyone could experience how great a book Daily Trumpet Routines by Claude Gordon is. Some other great books that fall into the same category are Charles Cullen Advanced Lip Flexibilities, Charles Cullen 100 Original Warm-Ups, Del Stager's Lip Flexibilities, Walter Smith Lip Flexibilities, Earl Iron's 27 Groups of Exercises, segments of St. Jacome that start around page 19 and happen later through the first part of the book, page 157 out of St. Jacome, page 125 out of Arbon. That has to be the first thing in your practice routine. No buzzing. You do this because you're trying to feel how your tongue level and your wind power work together. And feeling how the notes slot in on each note is training you how you and the trumpet are interfacing together and how you can play the most efficient. The next thing that you follow it with usually could be something with tonguing exercises, which could be double or triple tonguing sections out of Arbon, or at the last number 38 of setting up drills, it's a tonguing exercise. You could use that. You can use a whole host of other things. Then the next thing would be on scales and arpeggios. Another significant thing to go through is Herbert L. Clark's technical studies, which falls in the category of scales and arpeggios. To do this book the way that Clark assigned Claude Gordon means that you would go through the book multiple ways and with alternate fingerings. One first way to go through the book is 1 week of single tongue, the second week of K-tongued, the third week of doing double or triple tonguing, and then finally the fourth week doing it slurred like it's written. But however, doing a bunch of alternate fingerings to train your third finger to work independently and to give more control over all the fingers of your hand and familiarity with different fingerings. That's your first time through the book, making the focus of striking your valves hard, lifting your fingers high, and not worrying about speed or how many times you do it in one breath or how soft you do it. And then after you make it through up to lesson 8 or maybe lesson 9, you go back through the book again, and you start working a little bit on more speed or playing it faster or softer or more times in one breath. Each time you do that, you just push a little bit further, but always maintaining accuracy and clarity, and that your fingers are striking and lifting high so that you're going to make the most efficient use of your fingering so that you can play longer in one breath later. Eventually it turns into where you're playing so soft as in a whisper that you can barely hear it coming out of your trumpet, which means that everything has to be responding with just a very slight bit of air. So that shows you that your lips have to be vibrating efficiently. If you're stiff, that won't happen. You won't be able to accomplish some of those things that are in that book. But if you do it step by step through the book, every single thing that's in that book can be accomplished and more. Like, for example, playing Clark's Etude number 5 in one breath, or playing the 3-octave chromatics at the end of the book 4 times or more in one breath. That's all possible for anyone. I've seen students do it. I've done it. I've got friends that have done way more than what's in that book. All the metronome speeds are more than possible to outdo. The thing is that it's a process, step by step. So that book should be worked on at least probably once a year. You might spend 3 months or 6 months out of the year in it, and then take a break and do some other kind of scale, etude, technical sort of finger study book to replace that with, and then periodically come back to Clark. There are a lot of great books that can kind of interface in a lot of aspects of that, like Aaron Harris Advanced Studies, where it's got scale studies in every key and an etude, or Gotti's method, which has something similar where it goes through every key. The other thing that was unique with Claude is that we played in every single key every day. So that it didn't matter if you were playing C sharp or F sharp or B or whatever. One key is not any different than another. You got to know them all. And the more you do that every day, it becomes second nature.
Hello, my name is Paulo Silva from Brazil. I'm a trumpet professor at Minas Gerais State University. In 2016, I bought the book Hit It Hard, Wish It Well from Jeff Purtle. When reading this book, I found similarities between Claude Gordon's teaching and Clark. My first interest was about the teaching of the Clark technical studies. That's why I got in touch with Jeff. I've been studying with him since August 2019. And he showed me step by step the way we can improve our playing, the importance to understand why we do each exercise. Now I can say that each exercise I play or I teach, I have the reasons why I'm doing that. That's why in the book it's important to know what, how, and why we do such things. And the one thing in particular for me was very important was the practice of habit. I think the students, most of the time, want the results immediately. It's necessary to understand the time that needs to things or to each exercise become naturally. With the help of Jeff and following the Claude Gordon's teaching, now I realize how important what, how, and why we do each exercise and give time to do each one. The results will come in time.
Then the next element of the practice routine is usually involves like etudes or solos or transposition or orchestral excerpts or jazz improvisation. And you notice that that comes after all the technique stuff has already been done. You've done your flexibility scales, breath control, all this stuff. Now you get to play some music. Then after you do that, you don't let yourself get tired when you're doing the practice either. So another principle is that you always take short, frequent rests to avoid even the slightest fatigue. The final thing that I usually end my day with is a range study, which some books that you can use for that are Claude Gordon's Systematic Approach book. And after you complete that, you can go on to his 30 velocity studies, which has like scale patterns that go up higher. But the basic idea is Claude's Systematic Approach book, lesson 2, which is just one octave arpeggios, where it slurs like a one octave down, like C, G, E, C, and you hold the last note till all the air is gone. The purpose of that long hold is not to be a long tone. Claude never did long tones. The purpose of it was actually to do an isometric squeeze so that you develop the muscles that you use to blow. When you do that and you squeeze all the air out, you go to the point to where the note actually can't come out. And then you got another couple seconds that you squeeze the rest out, fighting to keep your chest up. And if you're doing it correctly, you'll feel the muscles in your back get a workout from doing this. And again, the main thing you're thinking about is keeping your chest up, not letting your chest collapse. And it isolates the muscles you use for blowing, and it really develops your power. You do that, and it chromatically works down. It works into the pedals. Pedal F through C sharp, you use normal fingerings. Like F would be first valve. You don't use other fingerings like some other people might do. So E would be 1 and 2, pedal E flats 2 and 3, and so on, down to C sharp. Then once you hit pedal C down through pedal F sharp on the trumpet tends to be flat. For a lot of people, it could be as much as like a fourth below the pitch. That's nothing to worry about. You don't want to play them loud. You just want to play them with a nice, full, relaxed sound. Because what they'll do is they'll get you to get a better vibration off your lips. It'll also encourage your embouchure to be higher on your top lip. And then over the course of going through the Systematic Approach book, the exercises expand. You'll also notice this is a pattern in Claude Gordon's teaching, that the material expands range-wise and interval-wise. Like you might start with the 1 octave arpeggios, then it turns into like 2, 3, 4, 5 octave scales and arpeggios. What that does, it gets you to play over the full range of your instrument without feeling like it's hard to go to a high note or a low note, and your trumpet playing feels like it's more connected over the whole range of your trumpet. So that high notes and low notes don't seem like they're that different from each other. It's just a matter of your tongue level and air being in a different place. So you work that down as far as you can go. Now, once you get to double pedal F, it's easy to get that in tune. And then you go down chromatically. Now, in the book, it goes down to pedal C, and it says continue down as far as possible. That really means as far as possible. I typically go down to an A below triple pedal C. I just stop there. At one point, I'd gone down to a quadruple pedal C. It's pretty hard to know what you're doing once you get down below a triple pedal C because it's hard to hear the pitch on the trumpet. But the point is that you go down as low as you can. You take about a 5-minute rest. Then you start on the part 2, which is what we'd also call the up routine. And on that one, you never do a long hold on the last note. If you do that, it'll mess you up. So don't do that. It's written in the book. Notice what's written in the book. With a method book that someone like Armin or St. Jacome or any of these other people have written, think about it, that they've put their wisdom into this with their career, and they've written a few little things in the book. So it benefits all of us to read it. Then it works up chromatically. And then the other thing that you'll see in the book is there's a rest in between each one of them. The principle behind that is you rest as much as you practice so that you don't get tired. And you go up as high as possible. What that means is like the book goes up to a double high C. That doesn't mean that you have to go to a double high C. If you get to a high C and it comes out and you get to a high C sharp and you miss it a second time, but you hit it on the third time, then you try for the high D. You try the high D, you miss it 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. Once you miss it 3 times, you stop. You don't go any further. That's the whole purpose of it. You do just enough to kind of get the feel of the tongue level and the air up there, but not so much to tear yourself down. And you only do this once a day. And then after that, you do what we would call relaxed lip or a warm down, which is essentially just Systematic Approach, lesson 3, part 3. It's a 2 octave arpeggio. It goes C in the middle of the staff, C, G, E, C, G, E, pedal C. You do that like 3 times. I personally will play it down to the first time I'll go to single pedal C, the second time I'll do double, and the third time I'll go to triple pedal C. And then I put my trumpet away. I don't touch my trumpet for at least an hour. Every single book in every page that he ever assigned had a couple stamps, just 3 of them. One said big breath, chest up. That was on every page I ever played out of when I took from him. He put it on there with a little rubber stamp. The next thing is if we were doing scale studies like Arbin or Clark scales or whatever, or arpeggios or an etude, he would always stamp, the second stamp would say lift fingers high, strike valves hard, because he wanted to drill that into your head so that you didn't forget it. And when you're doing those things, you focus primarily on that. But then when you're doing lip flexibility studies, like we mentioned before, or you're doing a range study, the second stamp he put on that page was watch the tongue. Now, what he meant by that is we talked about the stuff with tongue level and K-tongue modified tonguing. He wanted you to try to visualize what your tongue was doing inside your mouth. In 2016, I published an ebook on the Apple bookstore that is rather unique. It's called a multi-touch book. It's got embedded video of 110 minutes of Claude Gordon videos, some videos of myself demonstrating things, some illustrations, and audio files and things not possible in a paper book. I encourage you to check that out too. You're also welcome to contact me through my website at Purtle.com, where you can email or call me on the phone. My goal is that this will help you practice smarter and get more out of your practice so that playing can become a joy and that you can accomplish things that you didn't dream you could do.